Brett, thank you for the kind words. Before I give my remarks, I must take care of several housekeeping tasks. First, we require approval of the minutes from the New York City Bar Association's 2019 annual meeting. I therefore call for a motion to approve the minutes of the May 21, 2019 annual meeting.
Mr. President, this is Sheila Boston, and I hereby move.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
Oh, I second it. Tom Sloan.
Thank you very much. So by the magic of Kevin, the person behind the screen, there should be appearing on your screen, there it is, polling information. So please take a moment to indicate whether you approve or not the minutes from our 2019 annual meeting. I'm going to go out on a limb and deem that it is extremely likely that everyone has, or we have, approved minutes. So I'm now going to go forward with respect to the amendments of our bylaws. All members received via email the proposed amendments to the association's bylaws. I'm very pleased to report that the membership has voted to approve the amended bylaws. The materials that we distributed described in great detail all of the changes, but I'd like to highlight a few of them, which I believe will improve our operations going forward. First, we have merged the Constitution, which I'm sure many members didn't know existed, with our bylaws into one document, so that we have now only one governing document for the association. We have also, as Brett just mentioned, renamed the executive committee to be the board of directors. And this will help clarify to not just our members, but the outside world, who the board is. I am certain that there are any number of organizations that understood the executive committee to be a subset of a larger non-existent board. We have also increased the number of board members to a range of 16 to 20, which will enable us to invite more of our very capable members to serve as on the leadership of the New York City Bar Association. And finally, another change that reflects our practice, the amendments now will have committee chairs named for 1 3-year term, which is what everyone understood the requirement to be. The prior bylaws actually had a appointment for 1 year with subsequent renewals. So our current bylaws now reflect our practice. And I now wish to turn to the most important housekeeping task. Pursuant to Section 2 of Bylaw 23rd, there is no contest of the officers and committee members of the association, except the nominating committee. Therefore, the secretary of the association is empowered to cast a unanimous ballot for the following nominees, and there's no need to withhold applause until the end. For president, Sheila S. Boston. For vice presidents, David Arroyo, Joseph Drayton, Susan Coleman. For secretary, Drexel B. Harris. For treasurer, Thomas R. Sloan. For the executive committee class of 2024, Sarah J. Berger, Jaipat S. John, the Honorable Tanya R. Kennedy, and the Honorable Kiyo Matsumoto. Finally, pursuant to Bylaw 23rd, the members have elected the following members to the nominating committee: the Honorable Sarah L. Cave, the Honorable Denny Chin, Lisa Cleary, Matthew Diller, and Kaylin Whittingham. Traditionally, the outgoing City Bar president summarizes at the annual meeting the work done by the City Bar during the president's term, with a particular focus on recent work and initiatives. As we began to cancel our events and eventually close our building due to the impact of the pandemic, I grew increasingly concerned that I would have very little to report tonight about recent events, recent work of the City Bar. I could not have been more wrong. Within 1 week of closing our building, the City Bar Justice Center announced that it would be providing free remote legal assistance to our New York City frontline healthcare workers. This assistance would consist of the preparation of life planning documents without regard to income, including wills and powers of attorney. And we, in fact, have been doing so. 10 days thereafter, the Justice Center launched its COVID-19 Small Business Initiative, for which over 500 lawyers have volunteered to assist small business persons to understand and access the loans and grants available through the federal government stimulus package, and to pursue other opportunities available through federal, state, and local programs. Shortly after these announcements by the Justice Center, our Vance Center of International Justice announced its investigations into the adverse treatment of vulnerable members of society across the globe resulting from the pandemic. Our Lawyers Assistance Program never lost a beat. They are now providing remotely the same confidential services and support that has been so meaningful to so many of our colleagues who are struggling with mental health and substance use issues. These services are so much more important now, given the forced isolation to which we are all subjected. Our Office of Diversity and Inclusion has continued meetings with affinity bar members, now virtually, and at these meetings, we have worked together to try to identify the means to increase judicial diversity, not just in New York City, but across New York State. Also in these meetings, we were able to come up with a joint letter sent privately to Governor Cuomo, asking him to fill vacancies in the appellate division of the First Department, so that that department may once again hear and determine appeals on a timely basis. As you've heard, our CLE programs have hit the ground running, hit the virtual ground running. Within 10 days of our closing the building, we're up and running with remote CLEs. Since then, we have offered over 50 CLEs and programs on issues involving COVID-19 and on many other legal issues of interest to our many members. As you've heard, the attendance has been phenomenal, double that we had prior to the pandemic, with several hundred participants in many of these CLEs and programs. Our members who are practitioners in small law firms, and in particular the solo practitioners, have been most greatly affected by the restrictions on the access to the courts and access to the many resources that we and others afforded to attorneys in solo practice and in small law firms. We have sought, therefore, to try and mitigate these difficulties by focusing many of the CLEs and programs that you've heard described, particularly on the practice of solo practitioners and small law firms. With them in mind, we have established a weekly chat where they can get together remotely and talk about legal issues or anything else and just connect to have someone to speak to. We've also organized many library on demand programs with a particular focus on their area of practice. Our legal referral service has updated its website to link to several self-help resources. More importantly, they are actively engaged in ensuring that our panel members are both trained and available to assist on matters that we know are going to be of increasing need going forward, including probate matters and trust and estate matters. Then, of course, there is the work of our wonderful committees. Within 1 day after closing our building, the City Bar issued a statement urging Congress to include nonprofits in the federal COVID-19 stimulation package. Our Fashion Law Committee, taking a cue from that statement, recently issued a report asking New York State's congressional delegation to enact measures designed to provide desperately needed relief to New York City's retail and fashion industries. As of late March and continuing to date, we have urged federal, state, local, and even international authorities to release certain categories of incarcerated persons to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. We have written a letter to the Chief Judge and the presiding justices of the appellate divisions urging amendment to the professional rules of conduct, permitting lawyers to provide financial assistance to indigent clients for basic needs, what's known as the humanitarian exception to the professional rules, thereby allowing those attorneys who can and wish to assist indigent clients with money to be able to purchase groceries, clothes, and medical supplies. And once again, that type of assistance is sorely needed now. I note that we were asked by the new counsel to the Office of Court Administration for our permission for her to forward, which we did give, to the Permanent Commission on Access to Justice, our letter. And the reason for forwarding it is that the Permanent Commission has been asked by the Administrative Board for guidance on whether or not to enact the humanitarian exception. And it is our expectation that shortly the Permanent Commission will be issuing a report both supporting and endorsing the passage of the humanitarian exception that is so greatly needed now. Our committees have issued reports to the New York State and New York City taxing authorities, urging that there be no negative tax consequences for activities and the lack thereof, such as not being able to move from one state to the other, resulting from conditions imposed by the pandemic. We have written letters to OCA, urging measures to be taken to protect litigants, attorneys, and court personnel as the court system slowly transitions from its virtual operations now to, in all likelihood, a mix of virtual and in-person hearings going forward in ways that serve justice while protecting all persons who must appear before the courts. We have issued reports seeking to protect tenants and consumers from unwarranted proceedings and enforcement actions pending their ability to get back to court to be able to protect their rights so that they not be unfairly evicted from their homes or have judgments entered against them while they have no access to the courts. We have written a letter to the governor asking the governor to do all that he can to avoid any cuts to our legal services community, whose services now are needed more than ever, given the pandemic's disproportionate adverse impact on those most vulnerable members of our communities. And there's so much more that we have done just recently to address the pandemic. But I would like to take a few minutes to talk about some of the most important work that the City Bar has done prior to our addressing the pandemic. In 2018, we issued an ethics opinion asserting that lawyers could not enter into certain arrangements with litigation funders. We received enormous pushback, not just from litigation funders, but from many sectors of the legal community, urging us to withdraw the opinion. We did not do so because we felt that the opinion does clearly state the current state of play under applicable rules. We decided, though, to establish a working group on litigation funding, co-chaired by Debbie Raskin, a former City Bar Association president, and Lynn Nooner. The working group included many of the same persons who had criticized our ethics opinion, members of litigation funders, members of firms who actively work with litigation funders. And the working group, over the course of a year, arrived at a series of recommendations for amendments to the applicable rules that would allow law firms to have direct arrangements with litigation funders, subject, however, to certain safeguards designed to protect the interests of those firms' clients. I was particularly pleased to receive, for my approval and to act on, a report from the Legal Education and Pipeline Task Force led by Seth Bryant called Sealing the Leaks. The report called for a commitment by the City Bar to undertake a series of measures to enhance diversity in the profession. That report was followed by a report named The Diversity Gap, written by Ashley Bernal. This report focuses on the crucial role played by pipeline programs to assist students of color to become interested in, to enter, and graduate from law school. many of them as the first members of their families to do so. I am certain that you will be hearing from Sheila Boston over the next 2 years and from her successors for many years to come about all that the City Bar has done and will continue to do to enhance diversity all across our profession. The 2019 legislative session was one in which many bills that the City Bar had been promoting for years finally were enacted. Among the statutes that passed during that session were voting and election law reforms, protections of rights relating to gender, surrogacy, reproductive health, and immigration, criminal law justice reform, and many other statutes, including passage of the Uniform Voidable Transactions Act, with written in great part by members of the City Bar, and continuing efforts to support business-to-business arbitration in New York City. At the local level, we were part of a coalition that successfully supported the Fair Fares campaign. Try saying that 3 times quickly. We also were very proud to be part of a broad coalition that successfully obtained, finally, passage of a plan to close the facilities at Rikers Island. And we will do what's necessary to make sure that that happens. We even had some success at the federal level. Along with many other groups, we opposed cuts to SNAP funding. And again, as part of a broad coalition, we supported passage of the First Step Act, aptly named as being just the beginning of needed criminal reforms at the federal justice level. I want to give special mention to the work of the Immigration and Nationality Law Committee, chaired by Vicki Nielsen. Together with many other committees, they issued a report urging OCA to restrict warrantless arrests by ICE in New York State's courthouses. This pattern of arrests was leading to immigrants and even both those who are here with the so-called approval of our government and those without, from avoiding going to the courts for fear of being arrested. We were pleased to join efforts with a broad coalition of groups who made clear to OCA why these arrests needed to stop. And indeed, OCA finally adopted measures agreeing with our report and stopping the continued arrests by ICE in the courthouses. Thereafter, the Attorney General of New York State filed a lawsuit seeking to extend the prohibition on arrests, not just to warrantless arrests in the courthouse, but stopping arrests around the courthouse, because it made no difference to the litigants if they were arrested in the courthouse, if they were going to be arrested as they were leaving. We were happy, therefore, to provide an amicus brief in support of New York State's motion for summary judgment, seeking to have the rights of these litigants protected as they go to and from the courts. I also must commend the committee for opposing steadfastly what must have seemed like a ceaseless assault by the current administration on the rights of persons seeking asylum and lawful status to remain in these United States. The committee consistently defended the right to access our institutions of justice on behalf of these persons so they may seek and obtain appropriate relief. I know that you are all aware that the rule of law has been under attack throughout the world, including here at home. Our international law committees, including the Task Force on the Independence of Lawyers and Judges, have issued numerous reports, statements, and letters urging governments to cease the violence being perpetrated against lawyers and judges actively involved in upholding human rights and the rule of law, and to cease the harassment and violence against journalists and the suppression of the media, reporting on matters of great importance to their communities, including the spread of COVID-19. Last year, we created the City Bar's Task Force on the Rule of Law, chaired by Steve Cass. The 3 reports, some of whom that you've heard mentioned today, that were issued by the task force with respect to the position of the Attorney General of the United States, seeking to require Attorney General Barr to abide by his sworn duty to uphold the law of this land and to serve the interests of all members of our society, resulted in this association's call for adherence to the rule of law being heard throughout the world. And the statements that we have issued criticizing members of both major political parties for intemperate remarks directed at members of the judiciary have also served to have our voice heard nationally and internationally. Recently, the Task Force on the Rule of Law has issued reports criticizing the President's removal of inspectors general and supporting legislation designed to rebalance the relationship between Congress and the executive branch in the exercise of authority during national emergencies, such as the one that we are now traversing. The members of this association, together with all residents of the United States, owe the Task Force on the Rule of Law a deep debt of gratitude for its forceful defense of the legal principles on which our society is grounded. On a personal note, I must say that I will be forever grateful for the opportunity to introduce and interact with Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor at events hosted at our City Bar building. And I sincerely hope that we will be able to host similar events in the not too distant future. I also will similarly forever cherish the privilege of having worked with so many talented and dedicated lawyers and staff during my term as president of the New York City Bar. I thought about trying to thank some of these persons in tonight's remarks, but as you saw from the chart that Brett just showed you, there are far too many. It would take too long, and I would not be able to express my true gratitude. I will reach out to each individual separately afterwards to give my thanks for all of their support and all of the assistance that they've provided, not so much to me, but to all of the work of the City Bar. Fortunately, Sheila, these persons are going to be there for you and to have your back as you lead the New York City Bar into its next 150 years. And Sheila, you are absolutely the right person to do so. Your positive attitude, strength, and humanity will serve you and all members of this great association very well. We all look forward to your leadership, beginning with your first remarks as president of the New York City Bar Association. Sheila, the virtual floor is yours.